We're very happy to have Francis Donald speaking to us about the Heraclean process. And what is the specific title?
The specific title is Visualizing Planetary Aspects, but that's just kind of a tiny part of it all.
Yeah, okay, terrific.
How it is the title.
Well, Francis, you know, a lot of people have valued the labors of Hercules and say, what do we do with it? And Francis has come up with some methods and is working with some other experimenters to really give us disciples an opportunity to use it in a whole new way. So we're eager to hear all about it. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
First of all, we got to straighten Dual cool up, or he's not going to tolerate this. There, is that better? Okay. I feel very privileged to be here. It's really an honor to be among you. I started practicing in 2011, at the end of the Aryan cycle of 2011. I started practicing a system that came to be known as the Heraclean process, which I adapted from, let's see, where would it be best for me to stand? Maybe just out here. How about over here? Okay. Is that all right? Okay. Which I adapted from that marvelous little book, maybe the shortest of the blue books, called The Labors of Hercules, right? This is a special little book. One of the reasons is because it's one of the very few places where you get direct quotes from Sanat Kumara. He is the presiding one, and there's ample evidence in these writings to indicate that. You know, in these marvelous introductions to each sign, you'll find that evidence. So I don't have time to really talk about the process per se, how it develops ritually in this presentation. If you're interested in that, please come to my workshop presentation, which will be during the conference. Okay, it'll be an entirely different presentation. It won't be this warmed over, I promise you. Okay. Okay. The one thing I do want to state about this process is its purpose. The purpose of the Heraclean process is to gain a visualization that carries within it the lesson of the sign sphere as it is influenced by the planetary aspects extant at the time, in such a way that the meditator is inspired, influenced by that visualization. This visualization is called a guiding metaphor. I've dubbed it the guiding metaphor. It's guiding because it carries the lesson of the sign, or part of that lesson, the lesson that's relevant to the meditator of that sign. It's metaphoric, guiding metaphor, because this isn't a direct teaching. It's not do this in verbal command. It comes in the form of the symbol of a visualization, which gives it an entirely different way of affecting the meditator. Okay, so that's the core of the Heraclean process. Actually, everything else about the process is really designed to take you to a point where you can receive an effective guiding metaphor. So people say, oh, this process is so complicated. No. The ritual that takes you to that threshold is completely user designable, and it's designed to make most effective for you this guiding metaphor. For instance, the passing through the double pillars of Hercules, which you initially visualize, through the gate into the sign sphere of the sign. Well, the sign sphere is coined by Sanat Kumara, so you know I think I'll take it as probably true. And it's distinct from the sign cycle in that it describes a space, the sign as a space, as a sphere, whereas the cycle describes the sign as a passage through time. So you have time and space meeting, and it's at that magic intersection, which happens at the very center of the sign cycle, that the guiding metaphor can be realized. Okay. The first visualization I want to share with you is that of Gemini. which was Gemini 2011. And if you would close your eyes for a moment, and it's twilight, and imagine yourself up on a small hill, and you're looking down into a grassy field. It's that early light just before the sun rises. And so you can't make out specific detail, but you can see quite clearly. Okay, if you have a sense of that, that's all I ask of you. You can open your eyes. And this is the symbol that you see inscribed in this field. Imagine it is, say, 50 yards in diameter, but of course you're up and looking down on it in perspective. This is done so that I can illustrate. By the way, do you have a grain? How does this thing work? You push the button, go? Oh yeah, okay, gotcha. So as you're visualizing this yin-yang symbol, which is already pretty obviously Geminian, yeah? You see way in the east, at the far end of your visualization, right here, emerge a black-robed, black-hooded figure and begins walking clockwise around the symbol. Since this is a guiding metaphor, it's wordless, but it also suggests its own meaning. This isn't too difficult. He's walking clockwise, so it's probably someone who is what might be called an average human, or part of the average human family, who is moving into life on the non-reversed wheel. It occurs to him, life occurs to him as being the vitality of the physical plane. That's what drives him. As he moves through his life, that vitality decreases. Now he's in middle age. This light is growing less. So he moves down and around until the inevitable point of death at the bottom here. Well, he continues on his cycle into the dissolution of the etheric body, the dissolution of the astral, of the mental, and till he's reunited with the soul, where he spends 2,000 or 3,000 years in Devachan, working out the lessons of that incarnation, and then rejuvenated and ready to go again, he's out and running. Now, this is the cycle that Dual Kuhl calls the 700 lives. I doubt it. I think you might add as many as 3 ciphers to that. We may be talking about 700,000 lives, but hopefully not more than that. Of this period of moving on the non-reversed wheel, as Nicholas said last night, developing the vehicle, building that which can eventually take the light of the soul, right? So eventually, in some monumental life, he begins slowing his steps because he feels the tug, the pull of the other way around the wheel. And so the conflict begins. He slows his steps, but still there's ages of passage on the non-reversed wheel are an ingrained habit that he follows for, some many more lives until finally, in a truly monumental life, he stops at the top. And after reabsorption and his processing, he reemerges on the axis of Aries Libra. Here in the impulse of Aries, he's impulsed to return on the opposite or reversed or counterclockwise direction. But now there's quite a difference in his experience when he actually enters incarnation, because everything's reversed now. Instead of entering incarnation at the top and moving along a diminishing life, he's entering incarnation here, and his life increases as he lives. As the light increases, his experience is not attached anymore to a physical plane existence. He's repolarized, and he experiences ever greater light as he moves into life. But another magical thing happens here at this point, which is The jiva, who's dark-robed, steps out of himself and becomes a light-robed jiva who steps one step on the inner path, while the dark-robed jiva continues in the outer physical realm. Why is he dark-robed? Because this is the darkness of the physical plane, moving around. But now, every passage around the perimeter of the reverse wheel moves the inner man one step further on the inner path. At this point, there's this tremendous experience of duality, a painful awareness of personality. Anybody here have that? The weight of the personality. Here you are. If you think now this darkness as the personality, and we're talking about the inner path here, the weight of the personality on the inward traveling jiva, right? His experience of the light is just little, but the experience of his personality is almost overwhelming. It's another way of looking at, you know, the 99%, right? It was 1% light, 99% personality. But, as he traverses with every reverse cycle, he takes one additional step on the inward way. So he is continuously walking towards and into the light. So this is the path of discipleship. Now, here you have two wheels that are insinuated here, here and here. He's still, even on the inner side, circling the path of personality, which is the light self of the soul immersed in form. This is still his main experience. He's like Hercules here. By the way, this is Heracles. Heracles, this is the group. Down here you have his gesture. Right here he is in his original lion skin. Here you see his inner gesture, which is reaching out to his soul. That's what the labors were all about, closing the gap between personality and soul, which is difficult in this light to see, but the soul is here, and then above that is monadic consciousness, or alternately Uranian consciousness. By the way, the Heraclean process is an extraordinarily Uranian process. Okay, so let's see. What's that? Oh, you see, I'll stand back here. I am a Leo rising, but standing on that chair would be a little much, even for me. Okay, so it continues, the process continues. The path of discipleship is being traversed on the inner side. Then another reversal happens, a reorientation when he reaches the central point. Have you noticed how many times in the works of Dwal Kul that the central point is mentioned, the middle point, the central point? It is a monumental point of achievement. For instance, in Treatise on Cosmic Fire, in the first stanza, one of the phrases is when the point, the middle center, and the apex connect and circulate the fire, right? And then he goes on. It's a point of initiation, because what happens then? Instead of being personality oriented, even on the inner side as a disciple, a huge shift is made. One becomes fundamentally soul oriented. And it's at this moment that the Geminian keywords can be spoken with real truth, which is, I see my other self. And in the, wait a minute, what is it? I see, recognize, that's the word, yeah. I recognize my other self, and in the waning, and here's the key word, in the waning of that other self, I grow and glow. Well, if you're seeing something waning, you're looking at the personality from the perspective of the soul. That used to confuse me. I said, in the waning of the other self, you know, because I was so oriented towards the idea of looking at soul, you know. But this is after this level of achievement, Once you're reoriented to soul life, which has here form as its expression, but the light of the soul dominates here, right? So as you have moved into the realm of the soul, you can truly say, I see my other self, the personality. And this is where the symbol, I just love it when symbols do this, when they cleave so close to the explanation, that in the waning, and look here, this, as you move around, the self, represented by the darkness, begins to lessen. And so just like the opposite condition where physical life became less and less and less because life was conceived of as physical plane existence, now you have this personality life lessening, the waning of the other self, and I grow and glow, which is identification with this sphere of consciousness, which is solar consciousness. So at this point, the rod of initiation is applied. You know, you could set this metaphor up any way you wanted. It could be any initiation, but let's say it's the first. One clue as to what it might be would be the percentage of atomic molecules in the Adi plane of your 3 planes. So do you know what those percentages are? 50%?
5 and 100. So 25% first initiation.
Okay, well that's
atomic
interesting.
matter.
So if we just, see, this is a great thing about symbols. We're only given this, no words, right? And this traveling thing. So from what Michael just said, we can assume that this is the point of the first initiation, right? The upper side of the personality, and that actually works. And then where's the 50%?
That's the second.
So we could assume that that's a central point. At 50% is going to be that very important midway point before we step into soul domination, okay? So let's look at the symbol from another point of view. We have here also just a geometrical form, right? Rotary motion and spiralic motion. Well, we know from our readings that rotary motion is third aspect, personality, grounding motion. We also know that spiralic motion is the penultimate or quintessence. I have to accent those because we're in a 5th grade workshop here. Pen is 5th, penultimate, and quintessential, as Michael mentioned, experience, right? So you have this passage being the second initiation, which some call the first true initiation. I've heard it said that, you know, in certain conditions, they don't really even take into account the first initiate. It's really the second, when you can control the astral. So here we are at 50%, and you move up, and the third is taken at 75. So that would be here. Just to follow these, do you see how the symbol inherently gives you this? It's not that I decide this is here. You're just saying, well, let's see, that's about, you know, that's a quarter, that's a half, that's a quarter. So you can make these extensions of the esoteric wisdom into symbolism. So by using that system, when you reach the top, you are at the fourth initiation, because soul and personality is dissolved. Soul and the jiva, or the consciousness of the incarnator, are one. At that point, in the visualization, the dark hooded one, who's coming around this way, came to this point. The light hooded one was coming around this way, came to that point, and the dark hooded stepped into the light hooded, and it was just the light hooded. So we have the dark hooded, dark robed personality splitting into the two, walking the inner path, reaching the fourth initiation, where they unite. And what do? They move right back into incarnation in service to humanity. They don't even get the 2,000 years in Devachan. They get like a weekend. You get, right? And then they're back down here. But back to work, buddy. So, but now he's in Nirmanakaya. He is soul incarnation. if you meet anyone like that, please send me his email, or her. Right? So that's the story of this symbol. And notice how very particularly Geminian. This is a 12-fold story. This story occurs in every sign, right? It's the passage from personality to soul. This is the struggle that we're all involved in. You know, everybody could wear this around, right? Which is, I reach up to my soul so that I may know that which is the inspiration of my life, right? So that's why it's a Geminian guiding metaphor. You're not getting the whole story. It's not every way. It's not how Leo does it. It's not how other signs do it. But it does give insight into the Geminian process. Okay, moving right along. The next major image that described an astrological influence. This is like subjective astrology, right? This is another way of looking at astrology. Was in the Leo cycle. But here, at this time, the initial explication was not in the guiding metaphor itself, but as soon as I entered the sign sphere, right, the invocation, the passage through the pillars of Hercules. This is what I call a vibrational accelerator. What's the point? To move from the 5th subplane to the 4th, so that you're just below the 3rd subplane on the mental, where the impulse of the soul can come, right? So as I entered the sign sphere, it was a magical, Don Juan-like environment, desert environment, the province of the sun. I moved to the stairs at the edge of a mesa, passed up. I mean, even details like the first decanate ruler of Leo is Mars, so it was all red sandstone butte until I passed halfway up, and then it turned to a buff color because the second decanate ruler is the sun. When I emerged at the top, there was the rising sun. Well, I have Leo rising. I turned and saw the Temple of Leo, which was a perfect sphere of gold-colored glass mirror embedded 1/3 of the way into the top of the mesa, reflecting in its surface the environment above and around it, right? And what comes to mind here is the keywords of Leo, which are, I am that, and that am I. On an exoteric level, the sun reflects back to you that which you have achieved in this life. It is your environment. So looking at the temple itself, here it is, I am that, the reflection, and that am I. In fact, you could hardly see the temple because it really was the environment beyond the temple, okay, but colored gold. Well, an interesting detail, and this is why you have to keep a diary if you ever do the reckoning process, because most of these things don't occur to you at the time. Details come up later that reveal hidden aspects of your visualizations that sometimes end up being the most important qualities of them. For instance, this sphere, this golden sphere, was 2/3 extant, 1/3 buried, revealing that it is an exoteric representation of the sun. But if you want to have the esoteric experience, you have to go into the bottom third of the temple, which lies under the esoteric, into the heart of the sun. So again, the symbol and the philosophy come together in the metaphor, in the visual metaphor. So let me describe to you the Leo guiding metaphor. Horus holds out the Ankh of life to myself, who is in a sarcophagus. I can't see him, but I know he's out there holding out that light to me. Does that sound familiar at all? And what were the aspects? The sun on the ascendant, trine Venus and Pluto. Now think about that. You have the solar deity, if there's any expression of the solar deity, is going to be conjunct the rising sun, conjunct the ascendant of the event, right? The solar deity, we're not talking about the God the Father here, it's God the Son. Horus is the Son of God. He's the Christ of the Egyptian cosmogony. Holding out the Ankh of life. Well, the Ankh is, the symbol is almost identical to Venus. Life for those who seek is the soul. Into the sarcophagus, the Plutonian sarcophagus, the trine of Pluto and Venus. And at first it seemed like a kind of hopeless message to me. Because if I'm in the sarcophagus, you know, I'm not getting the light, so it basically says, you're not getting it. And then I started thinking about it and realized that Pluto is not just death, Pluto is rebirth. So this sarcophagus is actually chrysalis-like. What he's doing here is irradiating this sarcophagus in such a way that the chrysalis can open and the jiva can emerge and come forth and be reborn. That's the promise of the Pluto process, right? So, but what happened here was a new level of iteration of a guiding metaphor, which is a visual metaphor. Oops. Of the aspects coming forth as a visual metaphor. You have, you know, now you have 3 players instead of just the Sun or just Gemini. Now you have the Sun, Pluto, and Venus as active players. Not only that, this all occurs in my chart in the 12th house, which is, you know, Piscean house, which rules death and rebirth, because the end of the 12th house is the ascendant, okay? And I have Leo in that house, which of course is a sign of a being like Horus. So you see, at this point I was saying, hey, wait a minute. Because if you think I sat down and designed all this beforehand, I'm not that smart. You reflect back and find these connections. So wouldn't it be amazing if a lot of people started doing this and they created a database of visualizations and aspects? You know, let's say something modest like 200 million people. I mean, do you think there would be a thread of similarity running through these visualizations? Well, a cynic would say, you know, what you get is 200 million total fantasies, dude. Or you could look at it this way, which is that this solar influence has a unified effect. These aspects are representing, sure, they're through the lens of your particular natal chart, progress chart, but they're nonetheless potent figures with which to work, okay? Because remember, the purpose is to shed light on your process, not to just go to the movies. The next iteration of the guiding metaphor was in Virgo, which is in many ways the very opposite of Leo. And yet, because of that, it's connected at the hip. In fact, as we know, Leo and Virgo were considered one sign at another time. And what you have is a solar ruler on one hand and a lunar on the other. And as Nicholas mentioned last night, this is part of the mystery of the Sphinx, right? That it's the connection. What is the Sphinx? It's a guiding metaphor. And think about it. You know, ponder the Sphinx, and you will gain insight into the realm of Leo Virgo. That's the nature of that. So now the guiding metaphor takes on a completely different guise. It came as a Anubis-headed ebony staff, which I took off the central platform, and it immediately led me outside and around to the garden and back, and we stood before a great garden maze and the hedge rows of this maze. As you know, a maze is different than a labyrinth, which you walk on the floor of like the Chartres Cathedral. A maze is over your head, so you can actually really get lost in a maze. And this was a very, very, very large maze. It's night. The esoteric ruler is shining overhead, right? The moon. And we stand before the opening into this maze. And I realized that I don't want to go in there. This is scary stuff. And the only way I'm going to get through that maze is with this guiding metaphor. It will guide me, a guiding metaphor that actually guides. How novel. So it took me into the, after I, in a sense, we agreed on an inner level, we entered the maze and began traversing the long perimeter on the outside. And the idea was that when a passage that was appropriate came, it would indicate that to me and I would step in. But it didn't. I just kept walking, 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 and no indication at all. In fact, it was like it was just a piece of ebony wood. It was dead. Well, I started doubting. And then I started panicking after like a mile of inner walking. And these passages came and went on my left. Finally, I panicked and I just dove into one of these openings. And of course, immediately knew it was all wrong. I was totally lost. I turned around to go back out, and there was no interest to get back out. You know, I had made this other decision. So I moved. I was totally lost. I finally dropped exhausted in a little cul-de-sac of hedge, sitting there, and I realized, you know, I'm not going to be able to get out of this maze. So my only choice is my staff, right? As soon as I had this thought, I felt the peace, which is, by the way, a very strong component of Pluto. You know, death gets a bad rap in this culture, right? I felt this peace emanating, and I heard silently, all ways are part of the way. It just broke my tension, broke my panic, and I was immediately out on the outer periphery again and moving in the right direction. Now, totally unconcerned with the possibility of stepping into a wrong opening. That was finished. I just, okay, I'm with you. And we kept going for, say, another mile. Finally, the staff stopped. And clearly, there was an opening. I stepped inside the opening. And in a flash of illumination, I realized that this garden hedge is my natal chart in three-dimensional form. And that initial opening was passage into my ascendant. And now I was passing into Saturn, which is conjunct my ascendant. So I had gone all the way around, and now I'm passing into the Saturnian portal to the inner realm of my life. And silently I heard, this is how you entered life, right? Well, every ring of this inner maze has one planet assigned to it. I was in the ring of the ascendant. Now I'm in the ring of Saturn. So I passed around, all the way around, and then entered the next planet. By the way, you can do this visualization free of charge. And the way you approach it is after you go into a planet, planetary opening in the hedge, you move one full ring around, then back to the ascendant, and then you travel through the houses to the next planet, right? For instance, my next planet is 4 degrees of Virgo in the first house. So I moved, stepped in through Saturn, which is conjunct my ascendant, moved a few steps to Virgo and passed, no, I went all the way around once and then moved a few steps into the next level. So gradually you make your way through all the rings to the very center. The last passage was now deep into the interior of the guiding metaphor, would be the last planet in my natal chart. And it is, not surprisingly, Pluto in the 12th house. The staff had come home. And as soon as I stepped into that portal, I felt this incredible peace, because what was now occurring is the staff was the axis of this chart. And if you think about this, the natal chart is our sarcophagus. And I realized that what I had experienced in Leo was being represented in another form here, which is our very existence on this plane is a sarcophagus for us, right? So I stepped in, and Pluto is a release from that. He's, anyway, so I passed to the center of this maze, and looking up, saw Dubhe, which is the second pointer star, and is conjunct my Pluto in my natal chart. And at that point, as soon as I made that connection, the staff is part of the axis. It moves all the way to the pointer star, down through the staff, which is Pluto. And I spontaneously reversed the staff and found that my staff really wasn't a staff, it was an axis. For now, it was a crystal staff with a Horus head, right? At that moment, there was a vibration, and I lifted from the center up the axis. Sounds kind of new agey, but you know, have to deal with that. You get above the maze, and then all of the openings that were the true openings. Remember, there are a lot of false openings, as well as all these cul-de-sacs, these bad choices I made in my life. They were all revealed as this great, complex, integrated symbol of this thing called my life, right? In fact, it's a metaphor for my life flashing before my eyes, right? So as I continued to ascend, all of that blended together, and the top of this garden maze became like a letter of a word, a single symbol, just a round symbol with some cuts. And I saw that that letter could be part of a word, and that word would be part of a phrase, would be part of a sentence, would be part of a paragraph, would be part of a story of my who I am, moving from personality to soul. This is one little step, not even a word, a letter of a word on the way to that expression. Okay, how am I doing on time? Am I good? Okay. Oh, great. Oh, that's terrific. Okay. So the thing that occurred as a result of this double experience of Leo and Virgo was the integration of these guiding metaphors, whereas before I was just seeing them singly coming forth. Now I was beginning to relate one experience to the next, and they were progressive. Whereas before in Leo, that lid never came off the sarcophagus, right? I imagined, felt, experienced the power of the solar deity beyond it, but there was no way to get to it. It's interesting that that experience would happen in the personality-oriented Leo, right? That's the personality base. It's, you know, it's this lower circle. Because the other way of looking at this, by the way, is this a traverse from Leo to Aquarius, right? With personality orientation, moving into group understanding and group work. So it moved from that to this release through accepting the Plutonian gift out of one's personal hell. This is a lunar, esoterically lunar guided sign. The Christ light, like this lower symbol, is buried in form. It's being germinated, and it talks about the promise of the future way, but it's buried in form. So the only way is to accept the Plutonian way, however that comes into your life, and make the ascension through that energy, right? If you try to resist Pluto, you just won't work, won't happen. So the third installment of this triplicity of energies, which is represented by the Sun, Venus, and Pluto, happened in Sagittarius, which is my sun sign. And I wanted to introduce another concept here, which is all the senses, as they are represented on the higher levels, are part of how you can have an inner experience, or what we call visualization. But That's kind of a tweaked word. It's, you know, you think, oh, visuals, right? But there are other ways to have an experience of the inner side. For instance, all of you, I'm sure, have been in some very sacred place in the world, you know, whether it was Stonehenge or Chartres or a Kiva in the Southwest, or maybe just a stone circle somewhere, some place. Think of a place now that you've been like that, and when you went in, you just went, wow, some place like that. Can you, because most of you at least, think of a place like that. Take a minute and do that, because I want you to experience what I'm going to introduce now, okay? What's associated with your inner memory of this place? It's a feeling quality, but not so much emotional as a particular sense of the place, right? Well, I started pawing through Treatise on Cosmic Fire, which I'm like now in my third book on, you know, the first one fell apart like 5 years ago. And on around page 188 on this section on the senses describes this, there's this extraordinary chart which describes, it is on page 188, of the senses as you move up into the astral level. So sight becomes clairvoyance, right? And that's what we're talking about. If you're just talking about seeing on the inner side, it's clairvoyance, right? But it doesn't have to be actual, like going to the movies, right? It's an imagination. Well, actually, imagination, interestingly enough, is associated with the sense of smell, which is to take the essence of that which is outside of yourself into yourself, right? Imagination also gets a bad rap in this culture. Oh, you're just imagining things. No. If you're imagining it, you're creating a thought form, and that thought form has real existence. It's only a matter of intensification for it to actually manifest as a visual, right? You're on the path of that visual already, right? So what could this powerful sense, I mean, can you all get a feeling, you know, of being in some special place, right? Carry that feeling with you. What I came up with is it was the sense of touch, which is the ability to connect with the other in this particular way. Because that's what it feels like. It feels like an experience of touching this place, right? Well, I have found in the Heraclean process that this sense of touch actually is the most important single sense. That when you can experience that in a visualization, the rest of it falls into place. If you don't have it, it's sort of like tinkling of brass. It doesn't have a sustaining quality. Something about the connection through touch or this feeling quality is essential. And the Sagittarian experience, Sagittarius was the only temple that actually formed part of the boundary gate, the border gate between Sagittarius and Capricorn, right? The entire Sagittarian field of experience, or what Sanat Kumara calls the sign sphere, is this great field of high flowing grass. And as soon as I came in, I jumped up on this white horse and through the will of my own desire, moved this horse all the way across the experience of the Sagittarian plains to the far side, to a very small, really what amounted to a gatehouse, not a grand temple like in Leo at all, but a small connection between the two signs. As you know, there's two gates for humanity that are considered the great gates. The one in through Cancer, everybody incarnates for the first time in Cancer, and the one out in Capricorn at the mountaintop, right? But there's a third gate, a little gate. That gate exists between Sagittarius and Capricorn. Because I'm have my sun in Sagittarius. You know, in a way, I really hate to keep using myself as an example, but no one else has done this yet. And so I really don't have any, you know, it'd be great to say, oh, and then they, but this is what I have. So, but because I have a partile trine between my sun and rising sign, I have this strong connection to pass through the little gate that moves one from Sagittarius to Capricorn, right? Well, visually, the way this was represented through the metaphor of the visualization came from the potency of this sense of touch. That feeling that I asked you to experience, right? When I moved into this very modest, it was almost like a lodge, or a hunting lodge with, you know, wooden interior, very simple. But the feeling quality was very, very strong. And the guiding metaphor was just simply the opening of the doors in the east, the only temple that had doors in the east, onto a Capricornian landscape. And there was a large opening above the door that had no glass in it, just an opening where the Capricorn, the peak of Capricorn could be seen. As so often happens in these, the morning light hit the peak. Well, as Michael mentioned a couple of days ago, the light of Venus in Capricorn shines on the mountaintop. So again, you have the Venus. You have the sun, the aspects at that point were the sun trine Venus, which was conjunct Pluto. But now the Plutonian experience is the confines of the Sagittarian experience, represented by this small temple and the open gates into the purpose of incarnation, which is to reach the Capricornian mountaintop, right? Illumined by the light of Venus. I have Venus in Capricorn. So that's a kind of threefold playing out of this solar, Venusian, and Plutonian influence, and how that unfolds in this way. The most powerful experience, how am I doing? Are we good? Oh, great. Okay. The most powerful experience I had with the Resurrecting process was in Scorpio. Heracles is inherently a Scorpion. The labors of Heracles and the Heraclean process are inherently Scorpionic. It is the passage from, well, who rules Scorpio? We have Mars as a double ruler, but DK tells us that at this time, Pluto is ruling Scorpio, right? So what I'll describe the aspects. At this point, I was introduced to a new way of looking at the outer planet influences, which I've dubbed the astrological environment, which is a way of, what it is, simply, is that those planets that stay in aspect for an entire sign cycle, right, in one aspect to each other, become the astrological environment for that sign cycle. It's that simple. Of course, the only planets that qualify for this are from Jupiter beyond. Jupiter can swing maybe, what, 5 degrees in a sign, something like that. And of course, Chiron is part of that, and all the outer planets, right? And they form a signature that I found through this guiding metaphor, through this Scorpionic experience, can have a very powerful manifestation. So what was happening at the time was Pluto in Capricorn, cardinal, was trine Jupiter in Taurus, fixed, which was trine my Mars, my natal Mars, in Virgo, so, which is mutable. So you have this qualitative spiraling down from cardinal through fixed down into the mutable. And of course, the Mars is, because it's natal, it's my personal planet, but it's also personal because it's represents that which has to be overcome. Mars and Pluto work very closely this way. So, but in this case, instead of at the end of the chain, Pluto was at the top of the chain. And what I had was a threefold guiding metaphor. I hope you can get past with this, the kind of woo-woo sense that of this, oh, dude, you know, you're seeing these really cool, you know, I'm trying to bring some fifth ray quality to this so that it can actually be useful. You know, this isn't, okay, you say, oh, well, he paints those, you know, he can see those. I don't see, you know, I don't have these big color visions. I concentrate my way into these experiences, and it is made available through the aspects. That's what I came to find. That was the great surprise and the great glory. I get so carried away. The great glory of the Heraclean process. Glory. 6 ray stuff. Okay. So the way this threefold guiding metaphor unfolded was, and I want to introduce you just a little bit to how one moves to a place where they can receive this guiding metaphor. And I can't go through the whole thing, but you end up at the center of the temple, which has a stage-like platform, which I call a central pillar about chest high, heart high. And there's an opening directly above it in the dome of the temple. And that dome, remember, metaphors are intelligently constructed. There's no preconditions. You can move them according to what you need to have happen, right? So that which is beyond the dome of this temple is the third subplane of the mental. I've set it up that way. The temple itself is the fourth subplane of the mental. This passage between the central opening and this stage on the central pillar is a means by which, using fifth ray logic, a third ray influence can manifest as a third subplane influence, or soul, can manifest on the fourth subplane, which you have to close that much of the gap. Okay. So anyway, sitting in this temple, what I visualized, initially I thought it was going to happen once, but it eventually became part of the ritual, which is in the opening and the top, there are two concentric circles that rotate in opposite directions. This is some form of magical generator that lowers, as it were, a net or lattice of light that comes down. Now think of a net, like a fisher's net of light, but where the strings cross, there's these points of light. They're actually little elementals, if you look closely, and in full expression of light, because they are heralding the way of the visualization. The more you do with this, the more you provide the detail, the higher your vibration is raised, and the greater the possibility that you actually have a soul experience, a soul-inspired experience. Okay, so the net moves, drops, and encircles the central platform, and then this 3 arcs, which I try to represent here. This is pathetic compared to the visualization, but you can see that this is essentially 3 arcs of light, one here, and one here. It's a trefoil. They use it as a symbol all over the world to represent the 3 in 1. Okay. This descended, and it was these rolling arcs of electric light, which eventually became a phoenix-like form. Here you go. This is the look, right? But the thing about this form, the message I got, I swore I would not use the word message. The inner voice said, as it were, really what it is a sense of being impressed with the information. It's not you hear a voice. You're impressed with the information as a result of what you're looking at, okay? And what I got is, this is just the tip of the iceberg of this presence, which is the archetypal reality of the energy of this phoenix, which is Pluto in its very highest aspect, of the destroyer and creator, right? Well, as I was looking at this, I focused in being second ray. I focused in on the breast of this being, and as soon as I did that, what I saw was, gee, I even have a torch. There's this knight kneeling, offering this torch upward, right, with his right hand. He had a cuirass on, a breastplate, and on that breastplate was the phoenix, rising from his solar plexus up over his heart in this glorious spread. Well, the astonishing thing was he was overwhelmed with the experience he had just had of seeing this phoenix. He, you know, because that's on his breastplate, he's obviously of the order of phoenixness, you know, whatever that is, right? He's from Phoenix, right? What a perfect place for this. And so he just saw his guiding God, right? And has dropped to one knee and held it. And I'm the observer that gets to see both. This is the second aspect of the guiding metaphor. Well, think of the trine again. The first aspect was Pluto in cardinal, which represents the monadic, or the highest aspect, right? So you have the Pluto in manifesting in its cardinal relationship to humanity as the phoenix, promising rebirth. You know, if you're willing to take on the phoenix reality, you will be resurrected. That's the fact of it. That's what he's demonstrating. But now, at the highest level, you know, whereas in Leo, you know, I was in the sarcophagus of Anubis, Pluto. Now Pluto is in his glory, right? And the night, the second aspect, nightness is this very second, sixth ray kind of space, right? Is representing the second aspect, Jupiter in Taurus, fixed sign. And he is the great disciple who is recognizing his guiding force, okay? And then as I continued to watch, the night just faded out, and all that was left was the breastplate, was a cuirass above the central platform. The third aspect, and this is a leathern cuirass. You know, I talked about, it's like these things they used to wear that are hard, sort of, and they have this breast insignia on them, right? And it's all dark red leather, and I realized that this is a gift to me from Mars. In fact, as soon as I realized that, I walked to the central platform, and it was on me. And I got all three, because I have the phoenix emblazoned on the breastplate. It was worn by the night, and the suggestion is, become the night. Become the night, right? If you accept this, that's it. How are we doing? Is that it? Okay, well, that's a good thing.
Can you tell us a little bit about, just a tiny bit, about what your workshop is going to be about? Will it be?
The workshop's going to have a very different focus, very little astrological orientation to it, because you know, there are people that have no awareness of that. It's great that if you're interested in this process, that you have this as the core, because the other will mean quite a bit more. What I'll be doing is two things. Initially, I'll be coaching you actually through a Beetle course, which came up in our MS session, which is all you need is love. And I will describe this as a ritual and the extraordinary hidden potency that's such a simple, it's 18 seconds long, this chorus, right? And how much this can affect the thought forms prevalent at the time. So I'll go through that initially, and then I'll take you through a 30-minute, I know it's long, but guided meditation where we'll actually go step by step through the entire Heraclean process event, from stepping between the pillars, nuts to soup at the central platform. And I will encourage you all at that time to receive a Taurian guiding metaphor that is representative of this group, that group extant at that time, and whatever united consciousness is overshadowing that group.
Thank you, Francis.